In the arid hills of Canaan, where olive trees swayed under a relentless sun, Isaac and Rebekah lived in quiet hope, bound by a divine promise passed down from Abraham. God had sworn to make their family a great nation, a people as countless as the stars. Yet for 20 long years their tent remained silent, no child's laughter, no heir to carry the covenant. In ancient times, barrenness was a heavy curse, a mark of shame that weighed on Rebekah's heart. She and Isaac, now in their 60s, felt the sting of whispers from neighbors who saw their childlessness as divine disfavor. Isaac, a man of prayer, poured out his soul to God, pleading for his mercy to break the silence of their home. Genesis 25 verse 21 tells us, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The answer came like a sudden rain in the desert, but it wasn't without struggle. As Rebekah felt life stir within her, the movements were violent, a tumult of jostling that alarmed her. "Why is this happening to me?" she cried, her voice trembling with fear and wonder. Genesis 25 verse 22. Seeking answers, she inquired of the Lord, perhaps through a priest or a sacred place, and received a startling prophecy. "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." Genesis 25 verse 23. This divine word overturned tradition. Primogeniture, where the firstborn inherits the family's blessing, was sacred in their world. Yet God declared the younger would rise above, setting a course for conflict that would ripple through generations. When the time came for birth, the tent filled with tension. Rebekah labored, and the first child emerged, red and covered in hair like a wild creature born of the earth. They named him Esau, meaning hairy, a name that fit his rugged appearance. Genesis 25 verse 25. Moments later, another son appeared, his tiny hand grasping Esau's heel as if to pull him back. They called him Jacob, meaning he grasps the heel or supplanter, a name that hinted at his cunning nature. Genesis 25 verse 26. Isaac was 60, and the twins' arrival was a miracle, but the prophecy hung over them like a shadow foretelling rivalry. As the boys grew, their differences sharpened. Genesis 25 verses 27 to 28 describes, "The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Esau was the picture of strength, his skin bronzed from days hunting in the wilderness, his laughter loud and carefree. He was his father's pride, the son who brought savory game to the table. Jacob, quieter and reflective, preferred the shade of the tents, helping with chores and listening to his mother's stories of God's promises. This parental favoritism, Isaac's heart for Esau, Rebekah's for Jacob, planted seeds of discord. Parents' love, though natural, sowed division, a warning of how unequal affection can fracture a family. The brothers' rivalry came to a head in a moment that seemed small but changed everything. Genesis 25 verses 29 to 34 tells the story. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew." "I'm famished," Jacob replied. "First sell me your birthright." "Look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. The air in the tent was thick with the aroma of Jacob's lentil stew simmering over a fire. Esau staggered in, exhausted, his clothes dusty from a fruitless hunt. His hunger was desperate, his words dramatic. "I'm about to die." Jacob, stirring the pot, saw his chance. The birthright, a sacred privilege granting leadership of the family and a double portion of inheritance, was Esau's by right as the firstborn. Yet Jacob, with sharp calculation, demanded it as payment for a meal. Esau's careless oath, trading his future for immediate relief, revealed his impulsive nature. Jacob's cunning, seizing the moment, showed his hunger for more than stew. He craved the divine promise tied to the birthright. The text notes Esau despised his birthright, a choice that would haunt him, while Jacob's manipulation set him on a path of both opportunity and danger. This exchange wasn't just about stew or sibling rivalry, it was about the spiritual legacy of Abraham's covenant. The birthright carried the promise of God's blessing, the seed of a nation through which all peoples would be blessed. Esau's disregard showed a lack of vision, while Jacob's ambition, though questionable, aligned with God's prophecy that the younger would prevail. The story doesn't judge Jacob's ethics outright but lets the consequences unfold, showing how human flaws intertwine with divine plans. For those who hear this tale, Jacob and Esau's story is a mirror to our own choices. Esau's impulsiveness warns against trading eternal value for fleeting comfort, while Jacob's cunning challenges us to consider the cost of ambition. Their divided family reminds us to foster unity, not favoritism, in our homes. Above all, the prophecy to Rebekah shows God's sovereignty, choosing the unlikely to fulfill his purposes. As Jacob's journey begins, his grasping nature sets the stage for a life of struggle, deception, and eventual redemption, a reminder that God works through imperfect people to weave his story of grace. Tents of Isaac's household stood like silent sentinels in the sun-scorched plains of Canaan, where the promise of God's covenant hung heavy over a family divided by favoritism. Jacob, now a young man, carried the weight of the birthright he'd cunningly won from Esau years before, a moment that marked him as both ambitious and calculating. Rebekah, his mother, clung to the divine prophecy that the younger son would surpass the older, her love for Jacob shaping her every move. Isaac, aging and nearly blind, felt the shadow of death approaching, unaware that his decision to bless his firstborn would ignite a scheme that would change the family forever. Genesis 27 unfolds a tale of deception, betrayal, and divine purpose, as Jacob's pursuit of the blessing sets him on a path of exile, revealing the cost of cunning and the mysterious ways God uses flawed hearts to fulfill his plan. Isaac, his eyes clouded by age, sat in the dim light of his tent, his voice steady but frail. He called for Esau, his favored son, whose rugged presence and savory game warmed his heart. Genesis 27 verses 1-4 records. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." The blessing was no mere formality. It was a sacred, irrevocable act, a prophetic declaration that would pass God's covenant, land, descendants, and divine favor to the next generation. Isaac, perhaps unaware of Esau's sale of the birthright or dismissing it as invalid, intended to honor tradition by blessing his firstborn. Rebekah, ever watchful, overheard Isaac's words as she moved quietly near the tent's entrance. Her heart raced, knowing the prophecy that the older will serve the younger, Genesis 25 verse 23, was at stake. She loved Jacob, the quiet son who shared her vision for the covenant, and she believed he was destined to carry it forward. Genesis 27 verses 5-10 tells us, "Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, 'Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 fine young goats so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies.'" Rebekah's plan was bold, a risky act of deception that would defy her husband's will and risk divine judgment, yet she believed it aligned with God's promise. Jacob hesitated, not out of moral qualms but fear of failure. Genesis 27 verses 11-12 captures his concern. Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing." His worry was practical. Isaac's blindness made touch a critical test. Rebekah, undeterred, replied, "My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say." Go and get them for me. Genesis 27 verse 13. Her willingness to bear any curse showed her fierce resolve, a mother's love mixed with faith in God's prophecy. She prepared the goats, seasoning the meat to mimic Esau's game, and devised an elaborate disguise. Genesis 27 verses 15 to 17 describes, Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau her older son which she had in the house and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goatskins. Then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. Tent was heavy with tension as Jacob approached Isaac, the scent of roasted meat filling the air. Genesis 27 verses 18 to 24 narrates the encounter. He went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. Jacob's lie, invoking God's name, was a bold step, his voice trembling slightly as he balanced fear and determination. Isaac, suspicious, said, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." Jacob stepped closer, heart pounding. "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau," Isaac mused, feeling the hairy goatskins. Genesis 27 verses 22 to 23. Trusting touch over sound, he ate the meal and prepared to bless. The blessing, recorded in Genesis 27 verses 27 to 29, was rich and final. He smelled the smell of his clothes and blessed him. "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." The words echoed God's promise to Abraham, granting Jacob dominion, prosperity, and spiritual legacy. As Jacob slipped away, his heart raced with both triumph and dread. Moments later, Esau returned, his arms laden with fresh game. Genesis 27 verses 30 to 34 tells the gut-wrenching scene. After Isaac finished blessing him and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I am your son," he answered, "your firstborn Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." Isaac's trembling revealed his horror. The blessing once spoken was irrevocable, sealed by divine authority. Esau's anguish was raw. Genesis 27 verses 34 to 38 records, when Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, me too, my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright and now he's taken my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Esau's cry, "Bless me too, my father," echoed with betrayal. His realization of the birthright's loss now compounded. Isaac offered a lesser blessing, Genesis 27 verses 39 to 40. "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." Promised struggle but eventual freedom, a shadow of Jacob's abundant blessing. For those who hear this tale, the stolen blessing is a stark reminder of deception's cost. Jacob's cunning won him the covenant, aligning with God's prophecy, but it fractured his family. Esau's pain warns against underestimating sacred responsibilities, while Rebekah and Jacob's scheme challenges us to consider when ambition crosses into sin. Yet God's plan moves forward using even their flaws. This story calls the beloved to trust God's sovereignty, to seek his will honestly, and to beware the seeds of division sown by deceit. as Jacob's path now turns toward exile and transformation. The air in Isaac's tent was thick with the aftermath of deception, the echoes of Esau's anguished cries still ringing in Jacob's ears. The blessing he'd stolen secured God's covenant, but at a terrible cost. His brother's hatred now burned like a wildfire. Genesis 27 verse 41 reveals Esau's fury. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob." The threat was no idle boast. Esau the hunter was a man of action, and Jacob the quiet schemer knew his life was in danger. Rebekah, ever protective, acted swiftly to save her favored son, setting him on a path of exile that would test his cunning and forge his faith. Genesis 27:42-28:5 tells a tale of flight, divine encounter, and the beginning of Jacob's transformation, as God's promise unfolds in the wilderness. Rebekah, her heart heavy with the consequences of her scheme, learned of Esau's murderous intent. She called Jacob to her side, her voice low and urgent. Genesis 27 verses 42-45 records, when Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say, flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Rebekah's words carried a mother's fear, not just for Jacob's life, but for the possibility that Esau's vengeance could lead to his own destruction, leaving her childless. Her plan was both practical and strategic, sending Jacob to her brother Laban in Haran, a distant land beyond Esau's reach. To ensure Isaac's agreement, Rebekah framed the exile as a quest for a suitable wife, avoiding the Canaanite women Isaac disapproved of. She approached her husband, saying, "I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living." Genesis 27 verse 46. Isaac, still reeling from the deception, agreed. Genesis 28 verses 1-5 tells us, "So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him. Then he commanded him, 'Do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there, from among the daughters of Laban your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May He give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham.' Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way." Isaac's blessing, given knowingly this time, reaffirmed Jacob's role as heir to the covenant despite the deceit. With a father's charge and a mother's urging, Jacob left Canaan, a fugitive carrying both a stolen blessing and a divine promise. The journey to Haran was long, the road dusty and unforgiving. Jacob, alone for the first time, carried only his staff and the weight of his choices. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he stopped at a desolate place, the wilderness stretching endlessly around him. Genesis 28 verses 10-11 describes, "Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. Exhausted and vulnerable, Jacob lay on the hard ground, a stone for a pillow, far from the safety of his mother's tents. The stars above seemed to mock the promise of descendants as numerous as they, yet in this moment of solitude God chose to meet him." Genesis 28 verses 12-15 records the divine vision. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." The vision was breathtaking, a stairway bridging earth and heaven, angels moving like messengers of divine purpose, and God himself standing above, speaking directly to Jacob. This was no mere dream but a revelation of God's presence, reaffirming the covenant given to Abraham and Isaac, now extended to a fugitive who had grasped his way to this moment. Jacob awoke, trembling with awe. Genesis 28 verses 16 to 22 captures his response. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me I will give you a tenth." For the first time, Jacob claimed God as his own, not just the God of his fathers. His vow, though conditional, marked a shift, a schemer's heart beginning to open to faith. Bethel, meaning house of God, became a sacred marker of this encounter. The dream at Bethel was a turning point, a moment where God met Jacob in his lowest state. The stairway symbolized a connection between heaven and earth, a promise that God's presence would follow Jacob, no matter how far he wandered. The covenant, land, descendants, and blessing was not revoked by Jacob's deceit but reaffirmed, showing God's grace transcends human failure. Yet the journey ahead would test Jacob's newfound faith, as Haran held both opportunity and hardship. For those who hear this tale, Jacob's exile and divine encounter speak to moments of isolation and fear. His flight from Esau mirrors our own times of running, from mistakes, consequences, or broken relationships. The Bethel vision reminds us that God seeks us out in our wilderness, offering promises that outlast our failures. Jacob's vow, tentative yet sincere, calls the beloved to respond to God's grace with trust, even when the path is uncertain. As Jacob presses on to Haran, his story challenges us to see God's presence in our own journeys, turning stones of hardship into pillars of worship, and to trust that his promises hold firm no matter how far we've strayed. Jacob, his heart pounding from the dream at Bethel, pressed on toward Haran, the stone pillar he'd left behind, a marker of God's promise echoing in his mind. The road was long and lonely, the wilderness giving way to distant mountains, but the vision of the stairway and God's vow, "I am with you," gave him a fragile sense of purpose. Yet, as he entered the land of his uncle Laban, the man who would become his host in his trial, Jacob's cunning nature would face its match. Genesis 29-30 unfolds a chapter of labor, love, and divine irony, where Jacob, the supplanter, finds himself outmaneuvered in matters of the heart and hand, learning that God's plan unfolds through hardship and unexpected twists, turning the deceiver into the deceived. The journey to Haran took weeks, the sun beating down on Jacob's shoulders, his staff his only companion. He arrived weary, his clothes dusty from the road, and came to a well outside the city where shepherds waited with their flocks. Genesis 29 verses 1-3 describes the scene. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the open country, with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob, spotting the routine, asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him," they said. "Is he well?" "Yes, he is, and here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." As if on cue, Rachel appeared, leading her father's flock, her beauty striking Jacob like a sudden rain. Text notes: now Rachel was a shepherdess. When Rachel saw Jacob, the son of her father's brother, she ran and told her father. Genesis 29 verses 9-12. Jacob, moved by the sight of this kinswoman, rolled the stone away himself, a feat the shepherds waited for, and watered the flock. Overwhelmed with emotion, he kissed Rachel and wept aloud. his tears a mix of exhaustion, relief, and the joy of finding family. Rachel ran to Laban, and soon Jacob was welcomed into their tent, where he poured out his story of flight from Esau and the blessing from Isaac. Laban's greeting was warm, his arms embracing Jacob as a nephew long lost. "You are my own flesh and blood," Laban said, as Genesis 29 verses 13 to 14 records. Jacob stayed, sharing tales of Canaan and the covenant promise, while Laban listened with interest. But Laban's hospitality hit a calculating heart, much like Jacob's own. As weeks turned to months, Jacob's eyes fell on Rachel, her grace and kindness capturing his soul. He confessed his love to Laban, saying, "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." Genesis 29 verse 18. Laban agreed, seeing value in Jacob's labor, and the years passed like days, as Genesis 29 verse 20 notes. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. The wedding day arrived, a feast of music and celebration under the heron stars. Jacob, dressed in his finest, waited eagerly as the bride was veiled and led to him. In the dim light of the tent, the ceremony unfolded, and Jacob took his bride, his heart full of joy. But morning brought horror. As the veil lifted, Jacob saw Leah, Rachel's older sister, her eyes tender but not the ones he loved. "What is this you have done to me?" Jacob cried to Laban. "I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Genesis 29 verse 25. Laban, smooth as a traitor, replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work." Genesis 29 verses 26 to 27. Jacob, trapped by his love and Laban's custom, agreed, completing the week with Leah before marrying Rachel. The irony was bitter. Jacob, the deceiver of his father and brother, now deceived on his wedding night. Laban's trick, veiling Leah and holding the feast in darkness, mirrored Jacob's own schemes. For another 7 years, Jacob labored for Laban, his heart divided between the sisters. Leah, unloved but bearing sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, sought to win Jacob's affection, as Genesis 29 verses 31 to 35 records. Rachel, barren and envious, cried to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Genesis 30 verse 1. In her desperation, she gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob, who bore Dan and Naphtali. Leah, not to be outdone, offered her servant Zilpah, who gave Gad and Asher. Tent filled with children, but rivalry poisoned the air, each birth a victory in their silent war. Laban's flocks thrived under Jacob's care, but his uncle's greed grew. Laban changed Jacob's wages 10 times, as Genesis 31 verse 7 notes, seeking to keep him bound. Yet God blessed Jacob, his flocks multiplying despite the tricks. Jacob's cunning surfaced again. He used striped rods to breed speckled sheep, as Genesis 30 verses 37 to 43 describes, his flocks growing while Laban's dwindled. Laban's sons grumbled, "Jacob has taken everything our father owned," as Genesis 31 verse 1 records. God spoke to Jacob, "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." Genesis 31 verse 3. Jacob, his family now 12 sons strong, prepared to flee. For those who hear this tale, Jacob's time in Haran is a mirror of life's ironies. His love for Rachel, a joy that made years fly, came at the cost of deception and rivalry. Laban's trick turned the supplanter into the deceived, a lesson in reaping what we sow. The births of his sons amid sisterly strife show how God's promise unfolds through human messiness. Jacob's growing wealth and God's call to return remind us that the beloved, though entangled in schemes, are guided by the Creator's hand. This story calls us to seek love wisely, to trust God's timing in trials, and to know that even in deception's web, His covenant leads to redemption. Jacob's years in Haran had been a whirlwind of labor, love, and cunning, where the deceiver found himself deceived, and the supplanter built a family and fortune under Laban's watchful eye. Genesis 30 to 31 culminates in a tense escape, as God calls Jacob back to Canaan, promising to be with him. With 12 sons and a growing flock, Jacob fled Laban's grasp, only to face a confrontation on Mount Gilead that tested his newfound faith from Bethel. This fifth part of his saga unveils Jacob's flight from Haran, the covenant with Laban, and the divine assurance that God's promise endures through hardship, proving that the beloved, when obeying God's call, find protection and purpose even in the midst of pursuit and peril. Tents of Laban's household in Haran stood like a patchwork of prosperity, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Jacob's flocks had multiplied through his clever breeding, using striped rods to produce speckled and spotted sheep, as Genesis 30 verses 37 to 43 describes, leaving Laban's herds diminished. Laban's sons grumbled, "Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth at our father's expense." Genesis 31 verse 1. Laban himself, once warm, now eyed Jacob with suspicion, his smiles hiding resentment. Jacob, sensing the shift, confided in his wives Rachel and Leah, as Genesis 31 verses 4 to 9 records, "I have seen by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." God's hand had been at work, turning Laban's schemes to Jacob's favor, but the time had come to leave. One night, as the stars wheeled above the flocks, God spoke to Jacob in a dream, as Genesis 31 verse 3 states, "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." The words echoed the promise at Bethel, a divine nudge to return to Canaan. Jacob gathered his family, Rachel, Leah, their children, and the servants Bilhah and Zilpah, with their tents, possessions, and livestock. The household gods Rachel stole from her father, small idols of protection, hinted at her lingering ties to Haran's ways, as Genesis 31 verse 19 notes. Jacob, unaware, planned the escape during Laban's sheep-shearing festival, a time of distraction. As Genesis 31 verses 17 to 21 recounts, then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was fleeing. He fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. The flight was a gamble, a caravan of tents, children, and animals snaking through the night. Jacob's heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear, excitement for the land of promise, fear of Laban's wrath. 3 days later, Laban learned of the escape and pursued with his kinsmen, as Genesis 31 verses 22 to 24 describes. God intervened in a dream, warning Laban, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." This divine restraint spared Jacob, a reminder of the Bethel vow, "I will watch over you wherever you go." Laban caught up on Mount Gilead, his camp a mirror of Jacob's. Genesis 31 verses 25 to 30 narrates the confrontation. Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me, so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing." Laban's anger was real, but God's warning held him back. He accused Jacob of theft, searching tents and camels, unaware that Rachel had hidden the household gods under her saddle, claiming, "I can't get up. It's that time of the month." Genesis 31 verses 34 to 35. The deception worked, Laban's search fruitless. Jacob, his patience spent, unleashed years of frustration. Genesis 31 verses 36 to 42 records his outburst, "What is my crime? How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? If the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac, had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you." Jacob's words, raw and righteous, laid bare the injustice of his 20 years under Laban. 14 for the daughters, 6 for the flocks, wages changed 10 times, losses borne alone. His reference to the God of Abraham and Isaac claimed the covenant for himself, a bold assertion from the once fleeing supplanter. Two men, kin yet rivals, agreed to a truce. Genesis 31 verses 43 to 55 describes, Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar-sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galeed, saying, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." Pillar, a simple stack of stones, became a boundary, a vow of peace. They named it Galeed, heap of witness, and Mizpah, watchtower, calling on God to watch between them when apart. Laban blessed Jacob's family, kissed his daughters and grandchildren, and departed, the tension dissolving like mist in the morning sun. Jacob, alone once more, turned toward Canaan, his heart lighter by Esau's threat looming. The Mount Gilead covenant was a fragile peace, a reminder that family ties once broken require divine mending. For those who hear this tale, Jacob's flight and truce with Laban are a mirror of life's tangled relationships. His cunning in Haran, now met with Laban's own, shows the cycle of deception, while God's intervention reminds us that the beloved are protected in pursuit. This story calls us to seek reconciliation, to trust God's boundaries in conflict, and to know that His promise sustains us through the wilderness of family strife, leading the supplanter toward a heart transformed by grace. With the covenant stone of Galeed standing as a witness to peace with Laban, Jacob, the anointed heir bearing the name Beloved, turned his face toward Canaan, his heart a storm of hope and dread. The flight from Haran had left him with a large family, flocks, and God's reaffirmed promise from Bethel, yet the shadow of Esau loomed like a gathering cloud. 20 years had passed since the stolen blessing, and the road home was fraught with uncertainty. Would his brother's grudge have faded, or would it erupt in violence? Genesis 32-33 unfolds a chapter of preparation, divine wrestling, and reconciliation, where Jacob's cunning gives way to a night of struggle that renames him Israel, proving that the beloved, when confronted with their past, can be transformed by God's touch, emerging stronger for the journey ahead. Caravans snaked through the wilderness, a procession of tents, children, and bleating sheep under Jacob's watchful eye. Genesis 32 verses 1-2 notes, Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. The sight of angels ascending and descending like at Bethel was a gentle assurance. God's messengers encamped around him, a promise of protection. Yet Jacob's peace was short-lived. He sent messengers ahead to Esau in Edom, saying, "I have been staying with Laban and have stayed until now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. I am sending this message to let my Lord know that I may find favor in your eyes." Genesis 32 verses 4-5. The messengers returned with chilling news. "We met Esau, and now he's coming to meet you with 400 men. Fear gripped Jacob's heart. 400 men? Sounded like an army, not a brother. The man who had grasped Esau's heel at birth now trembled at the thought of his brother's vengeance. Genesis 32 verses 7-8 records, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people who were with him into 2 groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. His fear was practical, protecting his wives, sons, and possessions, but it revealed a heart still haunted by the past. Jacob's cunning mind raced, planning gifts to appease Esau. 200 she-goats, 20 male goats, and similar herds, sent in waves to soften his brother's heart. Genesis 32 verses 13-15. In the night, Jacob turned to prayer, his voice raw with desperation. Genesis 32 verses 9-12 captures his plea. "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, 'Go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper,' I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become 2 camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, 'I will surely make you prosper and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. This prayer was a turning point. Jacob, the schemer, laid bare his unworthiness, recalling God's promises from Bethel and his grandfather Abraham. It was not a bargain but a surrender, acknowledging that only God could bridge the gap with Esau. The night deepened, and Jacob sent his family across the Jabbok Ford, a shallow river marking the boundary of Canaan. Genesis 32 verses 22 to 24 states, "That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. Alone in the darkness, Jacob faced a mysterious figure, a man yet divine who grappled with him through the hours. This was no ordinary struggle. It was a physical and spiritual battle testing Jacob's resolve. The man, unable to prevail, touched Jacob's hip socket, wrenching it as Genesis 32 verse 25 notes, leaving him with a limp that would mark him for life. As dawn broke, the man demanded, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." Genesis 32 verse 26. Jacob, clinging desperately, replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then came the transformation. "Your name will no longer be Jacob but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Genesis 32 verse 28. Israel meant, he struggles with God, a new identity born from the wrestle, honoring Jacob's tenacity while acknowledging his divine encounter. The man blessed him, and Jacob named the place Peniel, face of God, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." Genesis 32 verse 30. Limping from the fight, Jacob emerged changed, not the supplanter but Israel, a man who had met God and lived. The morning brought Esau. Genesis 32:31-33:20 describes the reunion. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Jacob divided his family into groups, preparing for the worst, but Esau approached with open arms. Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. And they wept. Genesis 33 verse 4. The 400 men were not an army but a welcoming party, Esau's heart softened by time and God's grace. Jacob bowed 7 times, a sign of humility, and offered his gifts as a peace offering. Esau, moved, said, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob insisted, "No, please. If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably." Genesis 33 verse 10. The brothers reconciled, Esau heading back to Seir, Jacob to Sukkot, where he built booths for his livestock. For those who hear this tale, Jacob's wrestle and reunion with Esau are a mirror of life's deepest struggles. Peniel encounter reminds us that God meets us in our fears, renaming our brokenness into strength. Esau's forgiveness shows that time and grace can heal old wounds. Jacob's story calls the beloved to cling to God in the night, to humble themselves before kin, and to trust that his promise turns limps into legacies, transforming the supplanter into a nation's father. With Esau's arms open in unexpected forgiveness and the road to Canaan now open, Jacob, renamed Israel and bearing the name Beloved, settled his weary caravan in the land of promise. The Mount Gilead covenant with Laban had eased one burden, but the past clung like dust on his sandals. His family, 12 sons, 2 wives, 2 servants, and flocks numbering in the thousands, represented God's faithfulness, yet the rivalry between Rachel and Leah and the tensions among the brothers simmered beneath the surface. Genesis 33-35 unfolds a chapter of settlement, tragedy, and divine renewal, where Jacob's homecoming in Shechem brings joy but also violence, leading to a call to purify his household and return to Bethel. This 7th part of his saga unveils Jacob's struggles in Canaan, the dark incident with Dinah, and God's command to recommit to the covenant, proving that the beloved, even in the land of promise, must confront sin's shadows to walk fully in God's light. The reunion with Esau had been a miracle of grace, the brothers' tears washing away 20 years of grudge. Genesis 33 verses 12-17 records Esau's offer, "Let us go on our way and I'll accompany you." But Jacob, still cautious, replied, My Lord knows that the children are tender and the flocks and herds with young are with me. They are driven hard today, the animals will die. Please go ahead of your servant, and I will come at my own pace." Esau agreed, heading to Seir while Jacob moved slowly, his family and flocks a winding line across the plains. He arrived at Sukkot, building booths for his livestock, as Genesis 33 verse 17 notes, a temporary rest before pressing on to Shechem in Canaan. Shechem, a fertile valley city, welcomed Jacob with open trade. Genesis 33 verses 18 to 20 states, "After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver, he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel." Purchase was a stake in the promised land, a sign of God's fulfillment. Jacob's altar, named God, the God of Israel, was a vow of worship, his new name a declaration of his transformed identity. The city's sons, led by Hamor, saw Jacob as a prosperous trader, their eyes on his wealth and daughters. Dinah, Jacob's daughter by Leah, ventured out to see the local women, her curiosity drawing her into Shechem's markets. Genesis 34 verses 1 to 2 recounts, "Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. Shechem, captivated by her beauty, defiled her, his act of violation that shattered the fragile peace. Hamor, Shechem's father, approached Jacob to propose marriage, saying, 'My son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife.' Genesis 34 verse 8. Shechem offered a dowry, suggesting intermarriage between their peoples, as Genesis 34 verses 9 to 10 states, "Intermarry with us, give us your daughters and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us, the land is before you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it." Jacob's sons, hearing of Dinah's shame, burned with rage. Genesis 34 verses 13 to 17 describes their cunning response. "They said to him and his men, 'We cannot do such a thing. We cannot give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go.'" The brothers' demand for circumcision was a trap, exploiting Shechem's desire. Hamor and Shechem agreed, convincing the city's men to undergo the rite, as Genesis 34 verses 18 to 24 records. The men, weakened by pain, were vulnerable. On the third day, when recovery was hardest, Simeon and Levi, two of Jacob's sons, attacked. Genesis 34 verses 25 to 26 states, 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put to death all the males in the city, Hamor and his son Shechem, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The brothers looted the city, taking flocks, wealth, and women, their vengeance complete. Jacob, horrified, cried, "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land." Genesis 34 verse 30. Simeon and Levi replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" Their act, though fueled by justice, sowed fear and enmity, a stain on Jacob's peace. God's command came swiftly. Genesis 35 verse 1 states, "Then God said to Jacob, 'Go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau.'" Jacob called his household to purify themselves, as Genesis 35 verses 2 to 4 records, "Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and who has been with me wherever I have gone." They buried the household gods under the oak at Shechem, a symbolic break from idolatry. As they journeyed, God protected them, as Genesis 35 verse 5 notes. The terror of God fell on the towns all around them so that no one pursued them. Bethel, God reaffirmed the covenant. Genesis 35 verses 9 to 15 records. After Jacob returned from Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel." So he named him Israel. And God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you." Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked with him. Jacob built the altar, calling it El Bethel, God of Bethel, a place of renewal. Bethel, God reaffirmed the covenant. Genesis 35 verses 9 to 15 records. After Jacob returned from Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel." So he named him Israel. And God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you." Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked with him. Jacob built the altar, calling it El Bethel, God of Bethel, a place of renewal. For those who hear this tale, Shechem's tragedy and Bethel's renewal are a call to confront sin's violence with God's purity. Jacob's family, fractured by revenge, found healing in obedience. His saga reminds us that the beloved, though stained by conflict, can return to God's altar, their lives renewed by his promise. This story challenges us to seek reconciliation over vengeance, to bury idols of the past, and to trust the Creator who renames us Israel, turning shadows into the light of covenant. With the shadows of Shechem lifted and Bethel's altar renewed, Jacob, now Israel and bearing the name Beloved, pressed forward into the heart of Canaan, his family a growing testament to God's promise. The violence of Simeon and Levi had stained his return, but God's call to purity had set a course for healing. Genesis 35 to 50 spans the final chapters of Jacob's life, a tapestry of loss, favor, famine, and farewell where his sons' stories, especially Joseph's, unfold as the fulfillment of the covenant. This eighth and final part of his saga unveils Jacob's later years in Canaan, his relocation to Egypt, the blessing of his grandsons, and his death, proving that the beloved, through trials and triumphs, leave a legacy of faith that endures as God's promise weaves through generations to shape a nation. The road from Bethel to Hebron was one of fragile peace. Genesis 35 verses 16 to 20 recounts a heartbreaking loss as they neared Ephrath, now Bethlehem. Then they moved on from Bethel. While they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't despair, for you have another son." As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Benoni. But his father named him Benjamin. Rachel's labor, fierce and final, took her life, her last words naming the child son of my sorrow. Jacob, grieving the wife he'd loved since Haran, renamed him Benjamin, son of my right hand, a gesture of hope amid pain. He buried her under a pillar by the road to Ephrath, a marker of love lost too soon. Tent, once filled with her laughter, now echoed with sorrow, a reminder that even in the promised land, joy and grief intertwined. Further trials followed. Reuben, the firstborn, lay with Bilhah, Rachel's servant and Jacob's concubine, as Genesis 35 verse 22 briefly notes, an act of rebellion that cost him his birthright's honor. Jacob, learning of it, remained silent, his heart heavy, but God's plan moved forward. Isaac's death at 180, as Genesis 35 verses 28 to 29 records, brought a final reunion. Jacob and Esau buried their father in the cave of Machpelah, the field Abraham had bought, as Genesis 35 verse 29 states. Isaac breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. The brothers, once enemies, stood together in mourning, a fleeting unity over their father's grave, the past's wounds not fully healed but set aside for this moment. The narrative shifts to Joseph, Jacob's favored son by Rachel, as Genesis 37 verses 1 to 4 introduces. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph's dreams of sheaves bowing to his and stars, moon, and sun honoring him, as Genesis 37 verses 5 to 11 recounts, fueled their envy. The coat of many colors, a symbol of favor, became a target, Jacob's love a spark for sibling strife. The brothers' hatred boiled over when Jacob sent Joseph to check on them in Dothan. Genesis 37 verses 18 to 28 describes the betrayal. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. When they saw him in the distance and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. The brothers' plan, born of hatred, was a sin that scarred them. Reuben, hoping to save Joseph, returned to the cistern to find him gone, tearing his clothes in grief. Genesis 37 verses 29 to 30. Judah's suggestion to sell him spared his life but betrayed their bond. They dipped Joseph's robe in goat's blood, presenting it to Jacob, who wailed, "Joseph has been surely torn to pieces." Genesis 37 verses 31 to 33. The father's mourning was inconsolable, as Genesis 37 verses 34 to 35 states. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Joseph, sold to Potiphar in Egypt, rose through God's favor, as Genesis 39 recounts. His integrity in Potiphar's house led to prosperity, but Potiphar's wife's advances tested him, as Genesis 39 verses 7 to 12 describes. Fleeing her grasp, he was falsely accused and imprisoned, yet God's presence sustained him, as Genesis 39 verse 21 notes. The Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. In prison, Joseph interpreted dreams for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, as Genesis 40 records, predicting the cupbearer's restoration and the baker's death. Cupbearer forgot him, but God's timing prevailed.